Welcome to the first episode of Michelle's Path to Purpose. My name's Michelle, and I am a transformational guide. And I show people the power that's within themselves. And usually they already know. Usually that person is sitting behind the desk saying, I know my life means so much more than the life that I'm living now. And if that sounds like you, I want to say, I see you, I hear you, and I was there. And to its core, it was so hard for me to leave my 9-to-5 job because deep down, I felt like I wasn't worthy. I wasn't deserving. I wasn't 100% good. So how can I create this life that I wanted, especially if I just felt like I was a victim to my circumstances? Because my mother never graduated high school. My dad's first language is Spanish because he's Puerto Rican. And if I'm honest, my parents aren't the most intellectual people in the world. They made mistakes. We lived in a town where people were lost and used drugs as a solution, used alcohol as a solution. And if I'm honest, when I was a little girl, I didn't really have much dreams because I just didn't see that they were even possible. So of course, fast forward to my reality as an accountant on Wall Street, I didn't know if I could make it much further than that because I made it already far, or at least in my eyes. The societal versions of success were there. So if I collected these societal goals and I still don't feel happy, I just must not be deserving of this happiness. And I don't even think that I had the awareness at that time. That's how I was feeling. And it took a lot of work to get here. Fast forward today, I have a successful business. I'm a transformational coach. I lead retreats around the world. I get clients from all around the world coming to Florida just for me to hold space for them. I would have never thought in a million years that Michelle, me, would have been making the impact that I'm creating today. And I only share that not to boast, but to say you can too if you really feel that calling. I want to go back a little bit because I said if you're watching online, you kind of see that my hair is crazy and I just woke up and I have an oversized sweater. What actually happened was I was reading a book, I was in the bathtub, and I told myself, when am I going to be ready to use my voice? And you know that saying that there's no better time than the present? And I jumped out of that bathtub and I put on a tank top and I put my oversized sweater, and here I am recording this because my voice has the power to change the world. And I'm going to use it as such. Even in this last year, I feel like this has been the most successful year, 2024, of my career, of my personal life. And I've kind of had this podcast on hold for almost a year and a half because I've been afraid. I've been afraid to see what happens when I release this podcast. But I'm making this vouch right now to myself that this episode will be published, will be my first episode, and I will use my old episodes from the past. So going back, hello everyone. I'd love to formally introduce myself. My name is Michelle Escalera, and I am a transformational guide. I have my own business called Guided by Michelle, but I'm also the host of this podcast, Michelle's Path to Purpose. And I started this podcast as a platform to use my voice to grant permission for those who are afraid. You don't need the fancy cameras. You don't need the fancy clothes. You don't need the makeup. You don't need the hair done. All you need to do is show up. So I guess that this message, this mission and the purpose of this podcast is to grant permission for those who need it, who are ready to step out of the box, who is ready to experience this freedom, who's ready to say, the life that I know that I deserve is here right now, and I'm taking the first step. Before we kind of jump in, I want to share a little personal journey about myself and what brought me here. I'm from a small town in Connecticut. And in that small town, there are a lot of hardships. People addicted to drugs, to alcohol, to their own suffering, to their own pain. And I had the blessing of an acute trauma happened where I was forced to live with my mother, who I haven't seen in 4 years. So here I am starting a new school in high school, my 11th year. And a couple months later, I found out that I was pregnant. This wasn't a huge surprise because my mother was also 16 and pregnant and had me at 17. And there I went again, feeling like I'm a victim to my circumstances. And that happened for years. Feeling like I'm a victim of my circumstances, feeling like I was so angry and I felt like someone needed to make it up. Someone, like I needed revenge. I needed revenge. As I was so angry and I wanted to point the finger at anyone. But the reality is I made choices. It's time for me to take accountability and it's time for me to change my life. And that moment happened when I was in a toxic relationship, fighting, arguing, and I decided to move out of a moving car. I think it's a no-brainer to say that resulted in 9 staples in the back of my head, and I had no idea what to do. I felt like that was my rock bottom. And so I remember going home and being on bed rest. The next day, I actually had to go back to my hometown. My son was going to be with his father. And I remember being bedridden, and it hurt. It hurt that I couldn't find a mask to hide underneath of. I couldn't be mom. I couldn't be the accountant. I couldn't be the college student. I didn't have my friends. I didn't have my community. I was just in the room of my aunt's house, staring at the wall, saying, I really hate who I am. And I've always battled with suicidal ideation, but this time I didn't feel that way. This time I felt like I needed to go find myself and look for what I actually wanted in this world. It's like when I had that moment, I really just said, fuck this. I deserve more. And I didn't know what more looked like. I didn't know what more tasted like. I couldn't even envision that for myself. And then I kept on seeing things on my social media and online about mindfulness and plant medicine and affirmations and journaling. I think the first podcast I actually ever found was Sahara Rose, and it was all about purpose. And I'm like, whoa, what is my purpose here? Because it can't be this. It can't be being a teenage mom. It can't be living through these hardships. It can't be me believing that I'm not worthy and that I have to self-sacrifice and that I would never amount as much, because I feel like those voices were constantly playing in my head. And the first thing that I've ever discovered was ayahuasca. And if you don't know what ayahuasca is, it is this powerful, psychedelic, ceremonial brew. And when you step into ceremony space, you could just feel the love that those facilitators were feeling. And I'm even tearing up because that was the very first time that I felt like that I felt love. And I remember just looking, I just looked at the ceremony space and I saw these facilitators and asking everyone to sit down, and they're just hugging and embracing. And it was just like this purity. And I felt like I wanted to grab that up and show that to my son, because I didn't feel at that point that I did a good job of sharing with him what love really was, because I was so hurt. And I was in my own suffering. And that was even before I took the medicine that I felt this way. Now, during my ceremony, What came up was me constantly self-sacrificing for others. And that core wound was really that I just didn't feel worthy. But on that mat, in that ceremony space, in the dirt, I promised myself that I would start caring. And even if I made one step, that was so much better than where I was today. Now, fast forwarding to today, where I have been certified twice in holding space for plant medicine facilitation. I now hold spaces and retreats and events for people to heal using plant medicine. And I can't believe that that moment, that on my knees moment, created all of this. So here's your reminder that those circumstances that you're in are your fuel to move forward. But it's also okay to validate those wounds. Because what I've learned through this journey of personal development, if you don't look at it, if you don't take accountability, if you don't say, I'm ready to transform this aspect of my life, how can it? How could that be? It required me to go back in time, review data that I've collected in my body, and to release those moments. So that plant medicine experience has tremendously changed my life. I came home, got out of that toxic relationship, continued. I'm going to college, got my degree. At that point, I was making about $10,000 to $20,000 as a single mom. I then changed my life, got 40, got 50, got 60, got 80, got 160, got $250,000 a year as a result of me showing up for myself. And I also closed on my first house. Those were dreams that I never thought was possible. And I had to do a lot of work along the way, but I also received a lot of help and a lot of love. So this is what this podcast is for. Hoping that if I just share my life, my message, and use this voice, that it could be a catalyst for someone else's change. I am still working with using my voice and being proud and being loud. And this is why I hopped on. This is why I created this first podcast. I've actually recorded about 20 different podcasts with 20 different people and expertise and knowledge and background, but I was still hiding and I was still worried. But today I'm saying, fuck that. You can't put baby in a corner, and Michelle deserves to be loud and proud and use her voice. And that starts right now because I decided it. So let this be an invitation for you to do whatever small step that means, whatever small step that looks like. Because right now, you deserve it. Your future self is waiting for you in this moment. And she will be guiding you through every step of the way. And it won't make sense until later. What we hear a lot is surrender. And I remember being in your shoes and saying, I already let go of my job. I already let go of my husband. I already let go of all the things that I wanted, my stories. And I remember thinking to myself, what if surrendering wasn't anything physical? What if surrendering was just my mind? What if I decided to just stay quiet and not worry about my to-do list, not worry about anything in the future that I have to take care of? And sure as hell, nothing in the past. What comes up for me when I do that? And what I heard was the whisper that said, you deserve more. And it wasn't loud. It wasn't in my face, but it was a whisper. And that whisper grew stronger and stronger the more that I listened to it. And that whisper told me today to show up for myself, to show up and use my voice. And really what happened is, well, through a lot of trauma, it has constricted my voice. And not just through the trauma that I endured today, but really this collective trauma that we all go through. Historically, women weren't allowed to use their voice. We couldn't vote. Men were superior. Of course, myself as a woman feels unsafe to be loud and expressive and proud because historically, That's just how it was. When I think of my grandmother and what she endured, I just remember that I have endured the same thing. Because in those eggs were my mother, and I was my mother, and I have been traveling in all this time through my family lineage, and I am here now. But I will not disregard the fact that I've experienced those same emotions. But now it's time to shed those stories and create new ones. And we do have the power to rewrite the story every time we revisit. And what I've noticed that every time I revisit a moment in time that was not pleasant and that I would say is, I'm going to do air quotes, bad, there actually been moments that were used to propel me forward. So I'm going to hold reverence for those moments of hardships for myself, but I'm also going to hold that for you. And I want you to use this as a reminder to take the step forward because you deserve it. And I see you. And it is time for you to truly stand up and rise to the potential that you know that you already have. I appreciate you coming on and listening to this very short story of myself. But now I'd like to talk a little bit about the podcast and what my intention is with this podcast. This podcast is called Michelle's Path to Purpose. What I do is I like to support other women in my community, other women that have supported me, other mentors, other friends, and allow them to really share their medicine. There's so many modalities. And when I stepped onto this personal development story, this journey, there was so much out there. Learn how to meditate, learn how to do mindfulness. Let's do therapy art. Let's do family constellation. Let's do mediumship, all these things. And I know that you're curious about it all. And maybe you're intimidated and you're afraid, but also maybe if you hear the transformation that those modalities could actually give, maybe that would be the start of your journey, or maybe that would aid you in yours. So this platform is all about my personal story, things that I used to overcome hardships. We're going to be talking about trauma because I love educating people on trauma and how to release this trauma. We're talking about somatics. We're talking with other guests who is going to be sharing their medicine of purpose and how they stepped into the person that they are today. This podcast is a podcast that gives the viewers tools, tangible steps to move forward. But it's also about community, because community has been the best medicine that has helped me transform my life. And I'm hoping that it will transform yours. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And I really hope that this sparked inspiration for you guys. And I hope to see you again. Until the very next time. Bye.